The FlySafair Pilots have written an open letter to the public saying they initially intended to strike for only one day to demonstrate the seriousness of their concerns. But instead, they were met with a lockout from FlySafair. The pilots say they were pushed to a corner and were left with no choice but to take a stand. They say that this year alone, 37 pilots have resigned in search of stability and respect. Well, joining us now to take this matter further is SABC News economics reporter Katlego Legodi. Thanks for joining us.
A very good afternoon to you, Juliet, and good afternoon to our viewers at home as well.
What do you make of this letter?
This letter is a plea really from the pilots to say they want to get back into the skies. I think when the strike action started, remember they had put this down for a day, and that's when the employer locked them out for a week. Then they chose to push this to 2 weeks. And this is where we are right now. Yesterday, the strike entering the second week. And this was not anticipated because of the long meetings that they've been having under the facilitation of the CCMA. These meetings, we saw them sit on Wednesday last week well into the night. On Friday again, well into the night. On Saturday, they met again. And this is where they were actually conversing the members to say there is an offer on the table. Is this something that you would accept? Overwhelmingly, the majority of the pilots rejected this new offer. About 90% of them said no, they're not taking up this new offer. Instead, we saw them yesterday even opting to write to the CEO, Elmer Conradi of FlySafair for intervention because they're not finding each other with the people that have been designated to be the negotiators in this regard. Hence, today we see them writing this open letter, but this time around we see this open letter directed to the public,
yes,
so that the public can have an understanding, yes, of the challenges that they're working under.
So there are two main issues, if I'm not mistaken. The one is their remuneration. And the big sticking point is they said they're not greedy. What they're saying is they're still not back to what they were earning pre-COVID. And they thought by this time, surely we would be at that point. So that's the one issue. And the second issue is the rostering. They're saying, as I understand, that the way the roster system works, it's driven by an algorithm. And this algorithm spits things out which they feel are unreasonable. They say all we're asking for is time with our families over the weekend.
Yeah, they're saying that that particular scheduling, the roster, is unsustainable. And this is not something that they're asking for that they don't know of. So they're saying that this new system that is in place right now is a recent system. So what they were pleading, to the employer on was to reverse it to the old rostering, whereby that gave them a little bit of room to maneuver and to move around. For instance, they want 1 weekend off. And they're saying that
a month. One weekend off.
A month. And this is something, even when you speak to those that are in the aviation space, the analysts yesterday, I spent most of the day just speaking to those industry experts, trying to get a sense of how this strike is impacting the industry as a whole and South Africa perception as a whole as well. So you hear them saying that this demand is not reasonable. This is something that the employer can come to the party over, especially when we see them saying that, as much as we started bargaining at 17.5%, which is where they started, we saw them moving it down to 10.5%. They were willing to move it to 8% at some point. And yesterday when I was speaking to them, they could not actually go into the figures, but they were saying that the digit is way lesser. They are closer, a percentage or two, closer to the 5.7% that the employer had bandied. But they're talking about the rostering here to say, even if you are to say that you are paying us well, at the heart of where we find ourselves is fatigue and exhaustion. Sure. We're not able to spend time with our families. And what we're asking for is for you to take those issues into consideration. There was a point and a commitment as well to come across with somewhat of a rostering committee. And this was a commitment as well from the airline to say that they can accommodate the pilots by just coming up with some sort of a committee. But that particular committee was coming with certain terms that they did not agree to. For instance, that committee would not, it was not giving them the opportunity to strike if they would want to strike at some point. At some point, they were saying that that committee still leaves the powers to the employer in terms of the dictates of how the rostering works. So they were saying that they would agree to a committee, but that committee must not serve the interest of the employer more than that of the workers, because they are the ones that are experiencing this on a daily. So we're expecting that at least maybe the public would sympathize with them somewhat, because this is what this letter is telling us. But at the same time, they are waiting for somewhat of an indication from the CEO that he would directly be involved in these talks so as to bring the parties together.
Well, I think it's really good for us to hear from the pilots. You know, they've really exposed themselves and saying exactly how they're feeling. But I'm going to put that aside for 1 minute, because you've been quite busy this morning, haven't you? You've been at the critical minerals G20 meeting this morning. Tell us quickly about that, just the main focal points.
So this forms part of South Africa's marathon meetings around the G20, and we see this one championed by Minister Gwede Mantashe, the Minister of Petroleum and Minerals, in bringing the stakeholders together. And at the heart of this meeting was the critical minerals. These critical minerals are a buzzword right now, and you hear a lot of industry players saying that there is a need to capitalize on these critical minerals because the globe at large is seeking for these critical minerals. They're very important in terms of electric cars, in terms of batteries and the likes, and now they're working on somewhat of a framework and a strategy that will be taken to the greater G20 summit in November that would speak to at least safeguarding the interest of the countries here on the globe, here at the global south, where this critical minerals are concerned. So it's a working document that it will be taken all the way to the G20 summit later on in the year.
Thanks very much. Our SABC News economics reporter Katlego Legodi